Welcome in, everybody, to a very, very special show here in the beautiful Bronx in our wonderful WFUV studios. I'm Kris Pursiainen, joined by Miles Grossman and Colin Loughran, my good friends, my fellow beat reporters for NBA and WNBA basketball here at WFUV. We've got the matchup of the year to talk about. It has all led up to this. Everything this season, all of it. Started off, Draymond Green, Jordan Poole, a little bit of drama to start our NBA calendar year. Kevin Durant was traded. LeBron James played his 20th season of basketball. And it has all led to the first NBA Finals for the Denver Nuggets in, ever?
I think it's ever, if I'm not mistaken.
So
they're searching for their first ring ever. I know that for a fact.
That's where we're going there. They have a shot at that. The Miami Heat, they've been there. They've been biting at it recently.
Mm-hmm.
So close. Finals, bubble. Jimmy Butler pull-up transition 3 away the other year from making the finals, and
said he'd be back in that same position with that same group. They'd reload, and they did just that 1 year later, beating the Celtics in TD Garden in a Game 7. A tragic Game 7 for any Celtic fan worth their salt.
And here we are, folks. The NBA Finals, the Denver Nuggets, the Miami Heat. I feel like that's all that needs to be said with how important these teams have been all season, how different they've been all season. Miami, the regular season, a different team practically from the one we're watching now. But the Denver Nuggets, I think, is where we have to start. And the reason I say this is because they have had a journey to these NBA Finals. Before the season, the prognosticators over in Nevada, in Las Vegas, had them at plus 750 to finish the season as the 1 seed in the Western Conference. Well, that cash, here we are, a 1 seed, an 8 seed, the NBA Finals. Denver's road was through Minnesota, through Phoenix, through Los Angeles. What did you guys note about this team during those series? Colin, I'll start with you. When you watch the Denver Nuggets in these NBA playoffs, are your thoughts, your takeaways?
My general takeaway from this finals, first of all, I do want to mention, for years and years and years, it felt like we had said again, the Cavs and the Warriors. Parity is back in the NBA in a big way. 2021, you have the Bucks and the Suns. 2022, Celtics, Dubs. Now 2023, this might be the pinnacle of parity in the association. The Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. I don't think there were many people that predicted this being the finals matchup. Kris, to answer your question more specifically, my main takeaway with this Denver team is that they are such a complete unit. First in field goal percentage, fourth in three-point percentage, second in assists per game, fifth in offensive rating over the course of the regular season. Their path to getting here, more than respectable. Wasn't a pushover path. You had to take on Booker, Durant, LeBron, deal with all the noise that surrounds taking on those guys, because I can't tell you that I thought Denver was going to kind of slice and dice their way in the Western Conference Finals the way that they actually did in 4 games. I thought that one would go 6, maybe 7. And to be honest, they just showed up each and every game. They were the more consistently good team. They have depth, which matters. And that's becoming a storyline over in the East with Miami as well. It was a storyline against Boston. But specifically with this Denver team, you have guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green even, Michael Porter Jr. Names that might go under the radar to casual fans that are making big contributions in big games.
Yeah, I don't really know if anyone thought that Denver would slice and dice their way, like you said, Colin. I mean, to just be that dominant, it was shocking, and I think it was shocking to be from California myself. The Lakers faithful were not expecting a sweep whatsoever. You would think 5-6 minimum. This is LeBron James. This is Anthony Davis. And Jokic and Jamal Murray really played some of the best basketball I've ever seen, right? Jamal Murray, proving that he is that all-star caliber point guard, a guy you want leading your franchise. I think for someone who had a lot of question marks throughout the regular season, he's really been what stood out to me this playoffs. This is Jamal Murray's ball club. And when you got a player like Jokic, that's always special. A borderline MVP year in and year out, but he can't do it alone. And I think Murray's been the difference maker throughout the last couple of weeks, and you really can't say enough. And I think if Denver's going to continue to be this dominant, it's going to be special guard play on Murray.
Can I do the Kris thing of having an insane analogy that, yeah.
Seems appropriate.
Are we willing to embark on this journey? If Nikola Jokic is a boa constrictor, let's start there. Let's start
Set
there.
the groundwork.
He does not go on big personal scoring runs. He doesn't slam dunk over everyone. But what he does do is grind you down over the course of a game. I was on Pick and Pod with our lovely friends Thomas Aiello and Riley Lucas, and we discussed ahead of the Nuggets-Lakers series, in my opinion, why Jokic is an underrated athlete, not player, not skill. I'm talking about athlete. In the Denver altitude, to have the energy to go all game. Remember, they used to have to pull him in crunch time defensively from the game on the bench, left pine, right? But like now he plays in the crunch because he, in the Denver altitude, has the athleticism that it takes to give full effort all game. And I love Joel Embiid. He was my pick for MVP last year. Jokic, my pick this year. He'll give you 8 plays of like 95 Hakeem. And then 2 of how is this guy allowed to be on the court right now if he's clearly not in shape to play. And then 8 of like, whoa. And then 2, 3 of like, oh. And Jokic is so steady and so secure. He's the foundation of the team. He's their bedrock, right? But Murray, the venomous viper, that when the boa constrictor has the target right where they want him, will go in and strike.
Yeah.
Because Jamal Murray, let me tell you, is playing like a name brand superstar. 30 points a game, right? Like I can't understate how good he's been. And there's always this invisible asterisk with Jamal Murray. So I'm glad you brought him up, Miles, because it's like, oh, Jamal Murray's been great, but Jokic draws the attention. But, and, you know, I just don't see that in the discourse when other stars play together. KD and Booker teamed up. Booker started looking like a top 5 player in the league. Do we think those are connected? Okay, right? KD and Steph Curry team up, and KD wins finals MVP while Steph is drawing double teams.
Yep.
Do we think that got talked about? No. We talked about, oh, will Steph respond well to not winning the award again? Oh, how will he feel? Let's talk basketball, folks. When you've got superstars out there on the court, they have a gravity to them. And what Jokic does to open the game up for all of Denver's depth is fantastic. But we've seen stars play with teams with okay depth. We've seen the Carmelo Anthony New York Knicks. It's not enough. You need someone else. Well, we've seen the Luka Doncic Dallas Mavericks, the Damian Lillard Portland Trail Blazers. We know what these teams look like.
I think you're hitting on something very important here, and it's that there are different types of stars and superstars and elite players. They're not all on the same playing field. Like, I think Jokic is on a different planet than Murray, but that's not to discredit what Murray brings to the table. And playing with someone like Jokic that can facilitate as that kind of point forward from the paint, kick it out whenever you need him, really elevates what Murray's able to do. I mean, they've relied on him to score a lot more in the postseason than they did during the regular season. A lot of that was just the fact that Murray was getting back from injury, really becoming his old self once again. Averaged 20 points in the regular season. That number's up to 27.7 points in the postseason. That tells me they're relying on him a lot more. The thing that I like about what Murray's been able to do, Chris, the 2-point field goal percentage above 50%.
Bang.
For a player that has struggled with injuries, a lot of the time they'll be sheepish driving to the rim. They won't be as confident going up with their shot in the paint.
Yeah.
This number tells me he's got that tenacity back. He's not scared of falling off the schneid once again, dealing with injuries again. He's going for the brass ring that he sees right in front of him, and that doesn't happen without having a complement like Jokic on that team.
Well, you want to talk about Nikola Jokic. I mean, the big cheese, if I may. You're looking at historical stuff here, and I don't mean, oh, these numbers are so high, everyone listen to these big numbers, but I'm going to read you these numbers, And you got to take into mind, you got to look through the lens of this could be the best passing center to touch a 94-foot-long hardwood in the history of 94-foot-long hardwoods. And it's like, yes, we got Moses Malone. Yes, we got these guys who had skill, but none of them were enabled to this extent that has allowed Jokic to fail and to get back up again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the saying, you fall down 7 times, you get up 8. I don't know why you would get up an extra time, but Jokic fell down 7 times and got up all 7 times. I will tell you that. 29.9 points per game. Okay, let's call it 30. We'll be nice. Little up to 30 points. 13.3 rebounds per game. That's a center. Now, this is not some, I won't name names, the best shooting big of all time who can't actually be a paint presence for his team in Minnesota. And like, when you look at this 13.3 rebounds per game, it tells me that this guy's a force. He's a presence inside. But it's not just inside. 10.3 assists per game. Are you joking? No pun intended. Like, really? That's the offense, right? You think about at least 2 points per assist. You want to say he doesn't pass out to many threes? Bruce Brown, KCP, Christian Brown. Say they're all 2-pointers. That's 20 points a game off of assists. That's 30 points a game off of points. He's responsible for at minimum 50 points per game. At minimum. At absolute minimum. And we know there are 3-pointers. We know there are and ones. We know that it is ludicrous. And what's awesome, this is to speak to Colin here, who I know is more of my nerd stat guy. He's on me over in Geekland when it comes to stats. 53.8% from the field. And flip to the other end of the court. We talked about him getting pulled for defense. 0.9 blocks per game. Again, we'll be nice. It's a block a game. This is all-time stuff.
It's like the point per game thing in hockey, where if you can get over that 1 mark as a big, you know you're big time. And I look at what the Nuggets have been able to do. None of it has been easy. That Western Conference was an absolute gauntlet. They're going to have their hands full with Miami, which I don't think as many people are talking about that as they should be, because the natural reaction is to look at Denver, look at Jokic, and say, oof, it's going to be really hard to beat this guy. It would be such a great story for the association if Jokic brings home an NBA Finals trophy to Denver. And with that endurance, Chris, maybe he could be the next fullback for the Broncos, as you mentioned, that mile-high air.
Hey, now.
See, but Colin, you say Denver's tested, but I honestly think, looking at this Miami team, this version of the Miami team is probably the toughest team they've had to face so far, right? Obviously, right off the bat, 4-1 Minnesota, right? You eliminate that. And that Phoenix series was far more lopsided than I think a lot of us would expected, right? I don't think KD lived up to the lights as much as he should have.
I'm going to push back on the Phoenix series discourse here and say that I think that locker room was just a powder keg with the Ayton and Monty Williams situation, that no matter how good some of those guys were going to play or not, Phoenix just wasn't there, because when you're not meshing well together, it's incredibly hard to do anything super, super special. Look at some of the great teams in NBA history. 86 Celtics, a team that I always go back to. Those guys were going to Grateful Dead concerts together. That's how well they got along. 94 Knicks, maybe they didn't get along at times as well as they could have, but there was a cohesiveness there. Like, they all understood.
That was Pat Riley. They did it to win.
Oh, we're going to get to Pat Riley. But they all did it to win because they understood that together they could mesh well and play extremely effective basketball together. So I look at that Phoenix series. Yeah, definitely not what we expected it to be. I thought KD and Booker and company would really give them more of a series. I thought it would go 7. I don't remember if I thought Phoenix would win. Something tells me I probably did pick Phoenix, given Kevin Durant was there. This was the big acquisition, but definitely a harder series. The Lakers one, as I think we're in agreement here, was the one that really stood out to me. To really steamroll them in 4 games, something I didn't expect, especially how good Rui Hachimura was prior to that series against Denver.
No, I hear that. I'll give you that. And I don't think that should be, just scoffed about, that they 4-0'd the Los Angeles Lakers with Anthony Davis and aging LeBron James. That is a legitimate accomplishment. But when you look at what this Miami team has been through, right? Beating, I think, 2 of the toughest teams in the NBA, meaning Milwaukee and Boston, probably 2 teams that would say, hey, those are the toughest teams you got to face in the West, hypothetically, if they were there. So I think, just because Miami has beaten Giannis, has beaten the Tatum on the road in 7 games, I think this is arguably the toughest test that Denver's had to see.
I think there were holes in those ships, though. That would be my one point, is with Boston, you always knew there was something off about this team, even when they won the 3 games. I picked them to win Game 7.
Yeah.
I thought, under no uncertain terms, that the Celtics were walking out of Game 7 at home, as the Eastern Conference champions. It didn't happen, but there was always a hole in that ship, and that it didn't feel the same as last year. Without the presence of Udoka, really that defensive mind, Missoula claimed to be that, but couldn't make the proper adjustments to take on Miami. You saw that really rear its head at first in the Atlanta series, I'd argue.
Oh,
and then
okay.
Milwaukee, when you're that reliant on Giannis and you have to go without him.
Well, Atlanta did come back. They made it interesting.
Well, that was my point, is that
Yeah.
Boston's deficiencies really started to show for me in that series against the Hawks.
Yep. I got to say, you talk about these Nuggets and the test they're going to have to face in the Miami Heat. I think everything that the Heat have beat their opponents with has just spoken to their strengths. Like, I think it just speaks to their ability to identify another team's weakness and expose it. A team that Miles didn't mention, Miami's path to the finals, the New York Knicks. Their weakness, Tom Thibodeau's inability to adapt on the fly. Joe Mazzulla took until Game 4 of the Philly series to start really making changes. Tom Thibodeau took until Game 4 of the Miami series to start Quentin Grimes, which is a move Colin and I talked about being necessary before the series started. And so when you look at that, that is how Miami beat New York, by making them play the Miami game. And you know what? Miami wasn't a good shooting team in the regular season, but they knew New York definitely wasn't a good shooting team. So they said, let's have a shootout, see who wins. New York was like, all right, that happened how it happened. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks. Yes, injury, right, but Hero out. I'm not saying it's equal to a star caliber player, the Hero, one of those star role players or not a star, stars, right? Like what he's that. You know, I'm not.
If you're generous.
He's a quadruple A star. You know, I gotta right. But the thing is, without him, they played to what their strengths would be against Milwaukee, knowing Budenholzer wouldn't adapt. That guy is no longer employed. Sorry, that's where they're at. And you look at this most recent series, Boston, same thing. Didn't do it. They, ahead of the gun, they did do it. Before they even needed to. They made the adjustments that they would need to make and just started the series with them. They were like, here's how we got to play. Let's do it. You want to win? Let's do it.
Game plan was there.
And you want proof of that? Miami is not a switching team. They're not a switching team. You guys watch Game 7? They switched on about 2/3 of Boston's offensive possessions. Why? Because they did what it took to win. And so when you look at that, you got to think that this team has what it takes. But I want to go to Denver and their reinforcements. Because when you take a look at what the Nuggets have had under their belt, Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the depth of this Denver team has been the key. I said ahead of the Phoenix series in this studio, in that seat, on Pick and Pod, that the Denver Nuggets would defeat the Phoenix Suns because of their depth. Because Durant and Booker, I should say Booker and Durant, are spectacular. But you look at the 3-9, and you just got to think, hey, those are the guys. You got to think that those are the key contributors. Now, we got a caller on the line. Let's get to that. Hey, what's going on? Welcome into WFUV's NBA Final Show. How we doing?
What's going on? This is Zach. First time, long time calling in to say what's up to Kris and Colin. Big fan of the show. I just wanted to ask.
What's going on, Zach?
Thinking about tactical matchups against Jokic for Miami. I was wondering if you think they'll put Bam on Jokic in Game 1 and see how that works, or if they want to go to Jimmy or even Caleb Martin switch and then use Bam as a help defender. I'm wondering what you think, how they're going to guard Jokic in this series.
Zach, thanks for the call. Great question. We appreciate it. Either of you want to jump in here? I've got a take.
I almost think you let Jokic be Jokic in terms of scoring. It's the passing that you worry about if you're Miami, and for this reason, I think Denver matches up really well with the Heat. I think the Heat are going to give them a run for their money. I'll explain why I think that later. But if we're talking personnel, I almost think you're more worried about the supporting cast in terms of shooting the basketball, people like Michael Porter Jr. Like, you let Jokic score, not because you're willing to give up everything in the paint, but you have an understanding that giving up threes could be more detrimental. And Jokic is the type of player, he'll do that little Houdini trick in the paint and find a way to kick it out to Jamal Murray or someone like that who can easily sink a three. So I think for tactical purposes, watch the perimeter. That's really how Denver's going to try and beat you here. It's not going to be a constantly bully ball towards the paint. On the flip side, Miami, they're going to have to really play the same type of basketball. They're going to have to live on the perimeter, because if they go towards the paint, you're going to have to deal with Jokic and Porter Jr., big arms, big jumpers, big wingspan type of guys that can get in your grill and make sure you don't finish properly. This is going to be won or lost in the perimeter, in my mind.
The Denver Nuggets visited the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden on March 18th, 2023. Final score, Knicks 116, Nuggets 110. How'd they do it? Let's talk. Nikola Jokic, 24 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. Pretty good. He even had that one block that we know him to have. But to Colin's point, you know what won the Knicks that game? Nikola Jokic had 6 turnovers. That was not because he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. That was not because he was feeling sloppy that day. It was because the New York Knicks crowded the paint when he was in it and closed off his passing lanes to shooters. They said, throw it up. Take the shot. Go ahead. Get your 24. Jamal Murray had 25. No one else on the Nuggets even had 15 points that day. And so that, Colin, is precisely how you beat Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. You got to make him make the other guys work. And you take a look here. We've got a great graphic up. Bruce Brown, 11.5 points per game in the regular season, 12.3 per game against the Lakers. And you know he went off in that one game where it's the fact that they have someone that can do that as their 7th guy. Boom. Aaron Gordon, 16.3 points a game, took a step back. Took the green heart, Okogie kind of role. Rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. Only 12.8 points per game, down from 16.3. But you look at Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, they needed shooting against the Lakers. He averages 10.8 points per game in the regular season, 14.8 in the Lakers series.
And I think that's why it's so much easier said than done, right? Because when you say limit the outside guys besides Jokic, I mean, they have so many outside guys. Who in the Denver Nuggets lineup that gets serious minutes can't hit the 3-ball, right? It seems you really can't leave anybody open, and that's why Jokic is one of the most prolific passers. It's because he's got so many guys who can capitalize when they get the open look. I mean, it's really difficult for defense, but I think, if anyone can handle it, it will be Eric Spoelstra, but that'll be that battle throughout, right? Will they be able to limit Denver from the 3?
When I hear people talk about Jokic's passing, I keep thinking Bill Walton and those Portland teams and his presence on the 86 Celtics team. I mean, Larry, McHale, all those guys fed off of what Walton was able to do in the post and his ability to find the open man cutting towards the hoop in the same way Jokic can find that guy on the perimeter to sink an easy 3. And just to answer what you were saying, Chris, about Bruce Brown, that is the Nuggets' response to Heat culture. Bruce Brown is the most Miami Heat-esque player on this Nuggets team
true.
Because he will do whatever you need him to do. I still remember watching Game 7 of Bucks-Nets Eastern Conference semis in 2021. Bruce Brown, towards the later parts of that game, wasn't Durant, who hit a great shot in that game, no question about it, but that Brooklyn Nets team was lucky they had Bruce Brown in the same way that this Nuggets team is lucky that they have Bruce Brown. Just what he's able to do, I cannot speak highly enough about his presence.
I've got someone who, to Mike Malone, is an unsung hero of this Nuggets team, and it's the last player of their depth that I really want to hone in on here. I'll give quick shout-outs to Jeff Green, who one day was the Jaylen Brown to Kevin Durant's Jason Tatum in Seattle. Those two were supposed to be the next big wing duo.
Funny.
Jeff Green, still, 36 years old, and in that game against the Knicks had an absolute jam. He still got it, right? I want to give a shout-out to Christian Brown, rookie, having his struggles, but learning what it's like to be part of a functional, successful team. My guy here, though, is someone who I have not believed has been conducive to winning his entire career and now have flipped the script on, is Michael Porter Jr. You take a look at what he's done. You always say, Colin, he's never seen a shot he doesn't like. But in these playoffs, he's been a rebounder. He's been a passer, right? 14, 10, and 6 in one of those games against the Lakers, I thought was like the perfect game to describe his impact. I just think when you look at that guy and what he's done for them, yes, 3 for 10 in the closeout game against the Lakers, 5 for 16 from the field. It wasn't great. But the game before, 14, 10, and 6, and a steal. Game before that, 16, 7, 3 assists. He's moving the rock. The rock does not stop there anymore. He's moving it, right? Mm-hmm. And 10 assists total over his last 3 games against the Los Angeles Lakers. When he averaged 1 assist per game in the regular season, he's tripled his assist per game rate over the last couple games. I just think that is these Denver Nuggets in a nutshell. You have a guy who got a max contract for being a scorer despite not playing at an all-star level, forget a max level or anything. And he's totally just devoted himself over the last year to doing what it takes to help his team win. I think it's really impressive. I think he's one of the key members of this Denver Nuggets team, and he probably slots in as the number 3 under Jokic and Murray just because of his offensive impact, even if someone like Gordon or someone else is considered their 3rd best player. I think Porter has re-entered himself, and I think he was by default in the conversation because of the salary, and then now it's like that kind of Andrew Wiggins situation where a guy got paid a little bit ahead of his developmental curve, but now it's like, oh, they got him on that deal? Nice.
And it kind of makes sense why he got paid when you think about it, because when you just look at his body type, right? I'm not usually one to talk about bodies too much, but right, 6'11", that 7-foot plus wingspan, 6'11" with shoes. Maybe you could quote me on that. Maybe 6'9" and a half without shoes. But 7-foot plus wingspan for a fact, right? A guy who just really built for basketball, and I think that's why everyone was so high on him, right? Pay this guy now because the potential's there, and I think it's really been nice to see him mature because I think he's been someone that's in the spotlight since he was a kid. I remember when he was on Trae Young's EYBL team, I think, when it was like literally 2015, 2016, and seeing those mixtapes on Ball Is Life where like this kid was famous when he was literally 15 years old, and then, you know, he has that choppy college career, and it seems he's finally figuring it out, and he's been an NBA talent this entire time, so it is nice to watch him mature.
I think Aaron Gordon is the best overall athlete in this series. Not the best basketball player, no one's going to tell you that, but in terms of a guy that has just a purely athletic build, it's Aaron Gordon, and for that reason, Miami's going to have to get back on defense really quickly every possession on the court because he's the kind of guy that can kill you in transition. He gets those pretty alley-oops, pretty finishes at the hoop. He's becoming a more fluent passer, although that's something that I don't think is going to play a huge role in this series. You just worry about the transition, and Miami's going to have a response to that. I think Kevin Love gets an increase in minutes because of that, not because he's particularly quick, but he's just got a bigger presence about him, and it'll give Bam a break, which he's going to need in this series once or twice.
Do you go, to Zach's point, with Love on Jokic and have Bam Adebayo be the free safety, the help defense to come? That might be Miami's opening fire, their opening strategy. I do think just going and sticking Bam on Joker is the way to do it, trusting your big bodies, Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith, even if you're going to play him, but Kevin Love and Caleb Martin as your interior presences, because Denver doesn't really have, besides Gordon and Brown, guys that you think not that can cut, but can physically cut. Like we know Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, these guys are good cutters. Denver's very cut-heavy team.
I think overall you're just going to have to figure out what is the best risk-reward situation, because letting Bam be that kind of free safety also, not to put it too simply, will tire him out. He's not the kind of guy that can run around for days and days and days without that need. It's a little bit like that Embiid thing we were talking about earlier. He can only go so much. He needs a rest every once in a while. Putting him on Joker at least affords him a little bit of that because Joker's going to be looking to pass. For as much as he wants to score, it's not a Shaq situation where he's just going to turn around and try and dunk every possession. He's going to look for outlets, and I think Bam can do that for them with the wingspan, with the presence he does have, whereas making him that kind of free safety, as you put it, Chris, you might be then limiting yourself offensively with Bam on the other end of the court.
You got to trust Adebayo's switchability. I think that's it. I think you got to trust it. And if it's not working, then you stop. But you can't not you can't not try it because he might get tired. I think this is what you load manage for.
I think you stick him on Jokic to start the series, but if that's at least going somewhat decent, I wouldn't start screwing around with it in Game 3 and then trying to flip the script. I think if anything, you give Caleb Martin a look down there, if for no other reason than the guy's grabbing you 5.7 boards over the course of the playoffs per game. So I think his type of physicality, that kind of grit, will be helpful with this specific matchup. I wouldn't be too excited to start moving Bam every which way. He seems to be the kind of player that thrives with a consistent, everyday approach and role. I think when things start to get a little bit too complex for Bam, he's the kind of guy that might get a little flustered, at least at this stage in his career. Let other guys that are kind of used to this plug-and-play situation take on those roles. And really, that's what Heat culture is all about. Bam has bought into that, but not to the extent of some of these other guys, because people expected something of Bam Adebayo. Nobody's expected anything of Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent until now.
Yeah, understood. I think they've just got to be all in. I know it's a corny championship phrase, right? New York Giants 2008, all in with their chips, right? But I do think that Denver's going to out-talent you if you're Miami. But Boston tried to beat Miami by out-talenting them, and Miami has shown that that's not going to work. The thing is, Denver also has the strategy. This is going to be a war between Malone and Spoelstra. I can't wait. I've got one last question for you guys before we wrap up this segment on Denver. Jamal Murray, is he better now than he was in the bubble?
I'll put me on the spot with that one.
Yeah.
Miles just flashed me to look like you're up, buddy.
I say yes. I say yes. I think he's been better. He's been more calm, more poised. That is someone who has
It's tough to
looked
say.
fantastic in his role right now. And I do think that he has been a better player than in the bubble. I know the depth perception got a lot of shots to go in, but Jamal Murray's been great. He's been efficient. And you look at some of the shots he's hitting, he's always making them at the right time, right? 10 for 18 in the closeout game, 15 for 29 the game before that, 5 of 11 from 3, 6 of 14 from 3 the game before that. Oh, he had 5.5 assists in those 3 games too. He's doing it all.
I don't know if he's better, but I think he's more experienced, which has made him
2 steals,
right.
4 steals over the last 3 games.
I think that's made him a more complete player, having to go through what he's been through now. And I also think Jokic being better than he was in the bubble, in my opinion, has made Murray a more consistent unit on the court. So I don't know if he's a better overall player. I think he's more experienced, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes experience results in better on-court play.
I agree. Miles?
I think there were some moments where post-injury we thought to ourselves we might never see Murray touch that ceiling ever again that he did. And now that he's back at that level, it feels really good. And I think it is probably safe to say this is the best basketball of his career, this playoff stretch, in probably the biggest moments, right? I think what he's done for an MVP caliber player like Jokic is really can't be underrated, because can't be overrated. You know what I'm trying to say here. But it's
Absolutely.
like, yeah. Jokic is the kind of guy that can't do it alone. He's a specific kind of superstar, and the way Murray has complimented him, I think it's safe to say Murray's playing the best ball of his career.
I'm there with you. I got to say, I'm right there with you. I do think this is the best basketball he's played. Talk about the NBA, talk about Team Canada, wherever. This is the best Jamal Murray we've seen, in my opinion. Stay with us, folks. We're going to go to a quick break, come back, talk about the road to the finals for the Miami Heat and what it's taken from those fellas down in South Beach. Stay tuned.
What's up, everyone? I'm Julia Moss, one of the hosts of WFUV's women's sports podcast, All In. Join us each week as we break down everything from the WNBA, women's collegiate sports, the NWSL, and so much more. We're also joined by recurring hosts including Maddie Bamonte, Taylor Masetta, Sam Bohr, and Annabelle Watson. All In is a production of WFUV Sports.
Welcome back, everyone, to our WFUV Sports NBA Finals preview. I'm Kris Pursiainen here alongside Miles Grossman and Colin Loughran. Now, before we get started on this next segment, let me say, folks, do not be afraid to call in with your takes, with questions to ask. We're here, 718-817-2750. We'll run that back one more time. 718-817-2750. That's your number. Call in. Talk to us about these NBA Finals. We'll resume our conversation here with those guys down in South Beach, the Miami Heat, and their road to the Finals. Going up 3-0. Losing 3 straight. Flirting with the wrong side of history. Forever in the record books, will always be known as the first ever NBA team to blow that kind of lead. And yet, without Tyler Hero, 20-point per game scorer, get to Game 7. We know what happened. Colin, before we break down that Game 7 itself and all the storylines that came out of that one game, you're a Celtics guy. Talk to me about what you've seen in these two teams as they built up to being top powers, not just in the Eastern Conference, but in the league. And where you think each of them could learn from each other, where you think, obviously, Miami with their almost perennial success at this point, at least reaching the NBA Finals or coming close to it, has to show Brad Stevens over in Boston.
So I've thought a lot about this over the last couple of days because, as you know, the Miami Heat have given the Boston Celtics fits for years. This is not a new thing. This has been going on for quite some time, dating back to the days of LeBron James. If you want to date it back even further, I'm sure some 90s competitions between an aging Larry Bird and Alonzo Mourning were not pretty either. What I take away from it is you need the right people to do what the Miami Heat have been able to do. Specifically, you need the right management and you need the right coach. Pat Riley is someone who has seen it all in the NBA. 80s Lakers, Knicks in the 90s, converts to Miami, runs as a coach, runs as a front office, does incredible things with that organization. And it all stems from this work ethic that if you've read in any detail about Pat Riley, you know the kind of guy he is. Upstate New York kind of guy. When the Lakers were getting bullied by the Celtics in the 85 finals, it was Pat Riley who spoke to people like Magic Johnson, James Worthy, and aging Kareem and said, listen, we're not going to get pushed around. We have to push back and play with a certain type of physicality that they're not going to be able to match. Lakers did that. They won in 85, won again against Boston in 87. It's that kind of physicality that then leads towards teams like the Knicks in the 90s. What Riley was able to do there with Ewing, Starks, Oakley, Mace, people like that. And of course, we see it now with the Miami Heat. Even someone like Kyle Lowry, who had a terrible regular season, is playing good basketball in the postseason. You look at the Heat's path, 44-38 in the regular season, 7th in the East, lost their first play-in game. And I mentioned the people because it takes good people to be in this type of spot after losing a play-in game that a lot of people didn't think you really deserved to be in because you didn't have that great of a season, and then say, you know what, we're going to come out here and play good basketball. We're going to win and keep dancing in this tournament. They did just that. Then you got to play the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo, arguably the best player in the world. Mm-hmm. He was out for a little bit of that series, but when he did come back, you did finish the job thanks to Jimmy Butler, who's got that Pat Riley-esque bone in his body that's all about winning and competing at the highest level. I mention this in comparison to the Celtics because structurally they're very similar. Whereas Western teams like the Lakers and the Nuggets have seemed to build around superstars like Jokic or LeBron James, teams like Boston and Miami want a more depth-oriented approach that goes not just with the starting lineup, but off the bench. And sometimes that means that your top-tier superstars like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, even Jimmy Butler, they're not perfect. They're not guys like Giannis or LeBron or a prime Durant or Steph Curry. But they're just good enough to be considered those superstar caliber players that can give you big games in the postseason, big games over the course of a season, and then you build around these type of guys. You give them players like Bam Adebayo. The difference between Boston and Miami, and the difference in that series in my mind, was about the people that ran the show. Because they were smart enough to realize that, oh, Caleb Martin, he can play. Max Strus, he can play. Kyle Lowry, not washed yet. Udonis Haslem, yelling and screaming off the bench, has a place on this team as a motivator. Can bring the type of intensity that you need. And that's the word that I keep coming back to. When you have the right people like Coach Spoelstra, like Pat Riley, running the show, you're going to have a level of intensity that's very hard to match. And that's why the Miami Heat are in this position and are going to give the Nuggets a run for their money. Whether or not they win the series, not the point. The fact that they're here is impressive in and of itself.
And I think the point you're really touching on, Colin, is this kind of blue-collar attitude, right, throughout the organization. And they were able to pick guys who were able to buy into that blue-collar attitude very nicely. Guys like Gabe Vincent, right, Stockton, California, underrated. Caleb Martin.
Talk to
right?
us, Callie, man.
New shit.
Come on,
no,
man.
Really, Caleb Martin even, right? Think about his journey to where he's at. This is someone who's going to buy into your process. Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin, two bench pieces, right? Filling out star-level starting roles down the stretch in the playoffs. I don't know if there are that many. They're the kind of guys where it almost begs the question, how many guys like Caleb Martin, like Gabe Vincent, are on NBA benches
No one's
waiting
looking
for an
for them.
opportunity? It's true.
No one's looking for these type of players except front offices that are run like that of the Miami Heat, and there's not many of those out there. If you look at what they were able to do over the course of this postseason in comparison to what Denver has done numbers-wise, it's remarkable considering Miami is 27th in terms of three-point shooting over the course of the regular season. No one had high hopes for them coming into this postseason, but they played extremely well where it counts. They've had a better defensive rating in the playoffs than Denver. They're playing at about the same pace. I didn't see that one coming, especially when the game slows down in the way it does once you come to the playoffs. There's moments where it speeds up. You're going to have run-and-gun style of basketball, but for the most part, half-court sets become more prominent. For a team like Miami, having those type of blue-collared guys makes a difference.
I got to say, I'm going to give a shout-out to a random player, but not so random. And it's the exact kind of signing that we're talking about here. Josh Okogie, Timberwolf, for about 4 or 5 years there. And he, in his second season, was named to the Rising Stars Challenge as part of the international team. He started for the team when Jimmy Butler was traded. I think that he showed some promise, but he never got the offense to work, and he got given up on.
Yeah.
Phoenix Suns, for less than $2 million, secured his services for one season. They've got their own, we've got Josh Hart at home kind of thing. Like the Draymond type of player. He's been great for Phoenix all season. And that's the kind of guy that, like, Denver and Miami are chock full of. That's such a success story, that one signing. Imagine having, like, 5 of those guys. And I just think when you look at this Miami team, basically you take a look at the paths, like Miles was talking about, to where they got. Like Colin was saying earlier, Adebayo had promise. He was a lottery pick. Was he underdrafted because he wasn't able to showcase his playmaking ability in Calipari's offense? The Heat looked at his high school tape, saw the playmaking, they said, oh, this guy can do something that they don't know about. They took him at 13. Rest is history. Guy's an all-star caliber player, right? Year in, year out. And I just think you take a look at this Miami bench. You take a look at the voting for Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Jimmy Butler, 5. Caleb Martin, 4. And yes, Martin lost the award. Okay, right? But I thought he deserved it.
Yeah,
and
kind of did too.
I'm going to tell his story, not as if he won, but he needs his flowers, right? Okay. So
He got to where he got.
Let's get back to when I personally was 9 years old. I didn't yet know any of the music that I listen to today, any of the artists, right? But J. Cole, someone whose music I like now, was on the come up, we'll say, at the time. And in 2011, the year I'm referring to, he had a bar and a song called Autograph. Well, Autograph, kind of celebrity related, right? And he talks about how he's a wizard like Caron Butler. Okay. So, random NBA role player, essentially, gets a shout out from
veteran
J. Cole.
role player.
Yeah. And Cole is a basketball player, St. John's, right? And I think he knew what kind of guy to shout out for that bar. A real fan would want a Caron Butler autograph, And Caron Butler, it got back to him. He became friends with J. Cole. They became friendly. So Cole and Caron now know each other, and they had a relationship. It's built over the years. Now, actually, they're signed to the same agency, but they weren't at the time. Now, let's jump back to our more present age. Nevada, March Madness, Martin twins. Nebraska?
Nevada.
That's right.
Nevada.
That's right. Yeah. No, I'm not insane.
Wolfpack.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not nuts. All right. Nevada. Martin twins, March Madness, storylines, bursting.
Fill in the blank.
Right. And I just...
Identical twins hooping.
Awesome. Right? And Caleb Martin goes undrafted. And he talks to the Charlotte Hornets. Him and his brother both go to the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah.
Cody, Caleb, Martin, to the Hornets. Signed a 1-year deal, $898,000. The literal least possible amount of money that they could give him. And he was converted to a 2-way deal, meaning he'd be splitting time between the G League and the NBA. Now, he impressed the Hornets. J. Cole, Fayetteville, North Carolina. We know the ties. He's been to Hornets practices. They bring him in, talk to the team sometimes, and see what's going on. So he got to meet some of these Hornets players. And as Caleb Martin's hooping for Charlotte, Cole invites him to summer runs with him. Like I was saying earlier, J. Cole loves to play basketball. He went and played in that professional league after this, out in Africa. So when Caleb Martin's hooping and everything, Charlotte looks at him and they go, okay, we got to keep this guy. They give him a 3-year deal, $4.2 million over the 3 years. This is a pay raise from his $900K a year minimum salary. And it's a big one. So this is a big deal. Caleb Martin hanging around. Summer runs with J. Cole. I mean, he's living a dream in the NBA, this twin brother. And then they're separated. And Caleb is waived. Discarded.
No.
Designated for assignment, but the assignment is to be unemployed. I mean, there's no minor league talk here. This is just gone. Waived.
Out of NBA basketball.
And Caron Butler's phone rings. His old buddy, Jermaine Cole. You need to bring this kid in. You need to take a look at him. You need to set up a workout, take a look at what he can do, and take a look at signing him. Miami didn't have a roster spot. They couldn't, but funnily enough, they were looking for a 2-way player. Worked out. So, he signs a 1-year, $528,000 deal. That is a substantial decrease from where we were at before. With Miami, he had his 2-way deal converted to that kind of deal, and he's making $528,000, but he played like Caleb Martin. And so he earned himself a 3-year, $20.4 million contract. He signed through next season at $6.8 million, has a player option for $7.1 the year after that I'm sure he'll be declining for a larger payday. Good for him, but can we talk about the mental fortitude that it takes to be out of the NBA, to come back, to be leaned on in a Game 7, and to hit the big shots? Can we talk about losing 5-4? There are 9 voters. I'm not talking about one guy threw Caleb Martin a pity vote, right? There wasn't some panelist and she went, well, Martin hit so many big threes. I guess I'll give it to him instead of Jimmy because Jimmy wasn't great and everyone else thought it was Jimmy. There wasn't a guy who said, I'm split between Jimmy and Bam. I'll go Caleb Martin. No, 4 panelists of the 5 chose Caleb Martin because he deserved at least that much credit for his contributions throughout that series as potentially the steadiest Heat player. Adebayo, up and down. Butler, up and down, especially with his efficiency from the floor. Adebayo, nowhere to be found defensively at times, but Caleb Martin was there for the Miami Heat. That is depth. That is relying on your teammates and trusting them to be able to be relied on, right? Making that pass at the end, giving the guy the last shot. Caleb Martin. Let's talk about him. Oh my gosh. This is the story, right? This is the story.
I think the best thing you had said was that Caleb Martin plays like Caleb Martin. He's not trying to be anyone else. He's playing his brand of basketball. And an organization like the Miami Heat, as I was talking about earlier, that is run by some very smart people, some very gritty people, likes guys like that are not trying to do too much, that are willing to play within themselves. No hero ball here, although Caleb Martin has had some heroic moments throughout this postseason. It doesn't come from a place of I'm the man. It comes from I'm willing to do what it takes to survive. That starts with Pat Riley. That starts with Coach Spoelstra. Caleb Martin, a product of that environment, as well as his own work ethic. Those two things together make this Miami Heat team very, very scary in the postseason. It makes them very scary in this finals now against the Denver Nuggets. Chris, I was shocked that Martin didn't get it, quite frankly, because some of the shots he was hitting over the likes of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart at times were gorgeous to watch. Just little turnaround mid-range shots. Of course, I'd cringe every time he made one, but still fun to watch.
Unbelievably consistent, particularly in Game 7. I think that no one, for a guy like Caleb Martin to perform like that in a Game 7, backs against the wall, in that, it wasn't just any Game 7. It was that 3-0, back to 3-3, Game 7. To have that, you got to have a lot of faith in yourself. And I think Caleb Martin's obviously a guy that he's earned that faith in himself by the hours he's put in, because he wasn't always at this level of basketball.
0 minutes played in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last season between the Heat and the Celtics. 0 minutes played, because that game went down to the wire, and at no point did Miami say, we could use that guy right about now.
And let's also think about, why is he getting this type of extended time? I'm not saying he wouldn't be on the floor without the injuries of Oladipo or Hero, but that's why he's been relied on. I mean, and that's just spectacular. You think about someone who's, the expectations for him are to play a role on the bench, and then Hero goes out, 20 points per game. Oladipo goes out. They need to rely on a new core, and that core really comes alive, and it's been spectacular. I think, Caleb Martin, similarly to the discourse around Cam Thomas earlier in the year with the 40-point games all in a row, you think, how much talent is just sitting on NBA benches waiting for an injury, waiting for that opportunity? Because Caleb Martin really makes you think, like, man, this is someone who you thought of as an everyday role player who's playing like, same with that Jamal Murray type viciousness, right? That aggression that he's coming through and hitting the big shots. I mean, I think that's certainly an X factor is, will Caleb Martin continue his play throughout the NBA Finals? Because if he's not that Tier 2 superstar to Jimmy Butler's Tier 1 superstar, then the Heat really don't have a chance.
What he did reminded me a lot of the Terry Rozier outburst when he was a member of the Celtics. Now, the difference is Rozier much more touted than Caleb Martin ever was. Not as much as a grinder as Caleb Martin is to this day. But to your point, Miles, that's a guy that the Heat needed to rely on and continue to have to rely on because of injuries and things like that. But it doesn't happen if you don't fill the room with those type of players. I have no doubt that someone like an Oladipo or a Hero could do similar things. The difference is you got a guy that's got the hunger to play just a step above what everyone thinks he's going to be able to do for you.
Let's talk about Tyler Hero, right? We're doing player spotlights.
His outfits or like his basketball
I like
ability?
the bucket hat.
Bucket hat's bold.
I liked the bucket hat. Indoors.
I don't know if he can rock a bucket hat.
Indoor
if
bucket
he's that
hat.
kind of guy.
Oh, he had the shades on too.
Yeah.
I liked it. You know what? I'm usually an anti-Hero fit guy. I think
Fair enough.
he gets outdressed by Jordan Clarkson. There are other scoring two guards out there with better outfits. Even I'll go Emmanuel quickly as well, just as someone who's seen a bunch of those. But I do think that Tyler Hero is really good at basketball. And while I am quick and confident to criticize him when he is being evaluated at the standard that the national media puts him at, which is a star caliber player who's underrated and who doesn't get the credit he deserves. Okay, so then let's hold him to that standard. He doesn't play defense. He doesn't pass the ball. He doesn't, right? Like, let's talk, right? But if you want to talk about him how I think he should be talked about, which is through the frame, through the lens of a super role player, he's really good. He's really, really, really good.
So still a kid, kind of.
Counters on counters. I won't say on counters, like someone like Brandon Ingram or Devin Booker, even Kevin Durant, right? But Hero, he's got it, right? He's got it. And I think there's something to that that's really valuable for this Miami Heat team. When Jimmy Butler's not on, when he's not scorching, who on the Miami Heat can create a mid-range step-back jumper? Who can take a moving jumper besides Duncan Robinson? I feel like they have a guy who can do all the things Hero can do, but someone who can do all of them, it's just Hero. He has a unique skill set for this Miami team, and I think if he's an integral part. To see them do this without him has been impressive, Colin.
Hero's supposed to be targeting a Game 3 return. That will be interesting for Miami because they've got a great thing going. It's going to be fascinating to see how they attempt to work him back into the fray if he is going to be coming up. But only 23 years old, kind of a hidden gem as well. We talk about Miami's roster filled with hidden gems, hidden in the bench section of Coach Calipari's Kentucky program when he was there. Over the course of the regular season, played 67 games, 5.4 rebounds per game, 20.1 points per game, 4.2 assists per game. Hero, just the kind of guy that can consistently give you a good output. I think it is great that he could have him back for their cause here because, as we've been discussing, this will be won or lost in the perimeter. I have no doubt about that if Miami can hit their shots, play quick in transition, they will give Denver a run for their money. With that being said, working him back in will be a challenge. It's not going to be easy or as easy as people would expect because it is Tyler Hero. He's not the kind of guy that will adapt particularly well to any set of circumstances. I don't think you want him playing the 3 or the 1. I think he needs to be in that 2 spot, which means you're going to have to do some slicing and dicing, shuffling with the lineup.
Right, you want a Vincent out there next to him.
Right.
Or you want a Lowry.
No doubt that Spo can do that, but seriously, just one of those players you need to have if you're Miami because he is one of your upper echelon starters.
I mean, Tyler Hero is a 23-year-old who's been out for over 4 weeks, right? So regardless of what you say about him, he's missed some pivotal time, and the Miami Heat have built something without him. And I think the question mark remains, is Tyler Hero someone who even adds value, making a big impact, right? I think if I'm Eric Spoelstra, this is a slow and steady introduction to the culture and the unit that we've been building over the recent weeks. If Tyler Hero is just slotted into that starting 2 spot for Game 3, I don't think it's being handled correctly. And I think Tyler Hero is certainly going to take a game or 2 to get his footing under him. I'd be shocked if he comes out with 22 out of the gate.
I think him in that second unit could be gorgeous to watch because then it gives
Absolutely.
Miami another layer of added depth. And while Denver's starting 5 might be able to compete with what Miami currently has, that second unit would have a hard time with someone like Tyler Hero out there.
Absolutely. Well, we got a caller on the line. Don't want to make him wait any longer. Mike Calamari, assistant sports manager emeritus of WFUV Sports.
Hey.
It's a pleasure to hear from you, man. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys? Great show so far. I was literally going to call and ask about Tyler Hero, what were your thoughts about that, and you kind of got moved on to that perfectly timed. But I do have this question. If the Heat, let's say they split, they steal a big-time road game, Game 2, or they happen to steal both games in Denver, do you even bother to bring him back and try to mess it up what's going well for the Heat? I think there's a strong case to be made that his role doesn't fit what the Heat are going to need against the Nuggets. Given that they're probably going to need a lot of defense to stop that Nuggets scoring. I know he provides the offense, but I think there is a real question mark around if this guy is going to maybe hurt the team in this return.
I think the Denver Nuggets, if they have, as we were talking about earlier, the Miami Heat will find the kryptonite to try and expose teams with. I think it would be the defense of the Denver Nuggets. And so Tyler Hero could be very important to giving them not an elite, not an excellent, not a top 15 or 25 type of offensive talent. But you know what he can give them is a different type of offensive talent, and I think scheme versatility is the most important factor for a coach in the NBA playoffs. For a team right now, to me, it's their depth. For a coach, it's scheme versatility. We saw it take down Thibodeau. We saw it take down Mazzulla. We saw it take down Rivers, Nurse. These guys, Budenholzer, they won't change, so the times change and leave them behind. And I got to say, Miles, I want to hear from you on this because you might disagree with me, but I actually do think Tyler Hero is going to be important for the Miami Heat, especially if they let him work off the bench to start, because that second unit, having different offensive looks to throw at them, telling Hero, hey, rest that hand, bud. Make some plays out there. Do some passing. Huh? I think that'll look good for them. Miles, let's hear from you.
I hear you. I mean, that's a possibility, but Tyler Hero is Tyler Hero at the same time, and he's still 23 years old. I think that's a big point, is that, he hasn't developed into the type of veteran NBA player that can be slotted into a variety of roles. Tyler Hero is a young guy who is poised to score 25 points in an aggressive fashion with a couple pretty moves, but he's not necessarily the kind of guy who comes into a playoff series, makes an impact on both sides, and gels well with other veterans who may have slowly but surely moved on to a bit of a different ethos throughout this playoffs. And I know, Colin, we've talked a lot about this Heat ethos, right? And Tyler Hero, to be honest, is kind of the antithesis of that very ethos.
I agree with what both of you said, ironically enough, but I have a little bit of nuance to how I do feel about this, because I do think Hero will be necessary if he can play. If you drop the first two games, you have no choice but to bring him back, because you're going to need something at that point. If you lose the first two games in Denver, which is a complete possibility, and you need to win going back home to Miami.
And we know a series doesn't start until a road team takes a game. So
there you go. If that is the situation you're looking at, chances are your second unit is going to need something to spice it up. Now, you got to play him in the 2, which means you got to shuffle that second unit up a little bit. I don't know who would get less minutes in that situation. I'm sure Coach Spoelstra has it all figured out already, to be frank. But by that point in the series, you just need something. You need a spark. You need someone who could give you, 37 points in a playoff game, as Tyler Hero did against the Celtics in the bubble a couple years ago.
But the question from Calamari is now, if the Heat magically succeed, am I correct, is then that now becomes the really difficult decision. If you're succeeding without Hero,
I think it's still a no-brainer.
Okay.
I think it's a definite. You bring him back if you're down 0-2. Even if you go up 2-0.
If you go up,
then you're this close. The way I feel, because then you're going home with the 2-0 lead. Like, you're within an earshot of winning a championship. You need all of your best cards at your disposal, and Hero is, without a doubt, one of your best offensive weapons.
Even after 4 weeks.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For as good as Strus, Martin, and these other guys have been, Hero has been there as well. He's been in an NBA Finals. He knows what it's about. Now, it was a different NBA Finals in the bubble. Some may even say it was harder. I'm not one of those people. I think it was hard, but let's be honest, it was a little bit different. But still, that experience counts. Being able to have that kind of durability to play in an enclosed environment over a period of numerous weeks and play some pretty challenging teams along the way, that helps and matters when you're looking at a series against Denver and the depth they have and that man in Nikola Jokic on that team.
Absolutely. Well, we talked Jokic. We talked the head of the snake and my snake analogy there. But with Miami, there's not really a question. There is no sidekick snake, right? They're I don't even know what kind of I did Viper from her. I'm out. I give up. I tap out. Listen, Jimmy Butler is their head. And I don't want to say of the snake as in everyone falls behind him, but he is the tone setter of the team. He's the locker room leader. You saw Bam Adebayo offer him the Eastern Conference Finals trophy. Jimmy goes, no, I'll hold the next one, right? He's the guy who really is insane about the Heat culture, who really sets the example for the rest of his teammates. Now, they don't all have to be as nuts as him. I don't think he expects them to be, but I do think he expects them to give their all. I don't think that's unfair of him. Competing for an NBA championship, you kind of want to get the most out of everyone. But what's great about the best NBA head coaches and the best NBA superstars, which you're seeing in the relationship between Butler and Spoelstra, is that they sell their guys in a way that appeals to the selfish desires of people. Right? Ultimately, we live in a world where, not to get philosophical on you, but if you're not looking out for yourself, there's a chance that no one else will. And I feel like in Heat culture, it's laid out very clearly. You come here, you get under this weight, under this BMI, above this muscle, whatever, density, and below this fat percentage. And then we will do our best to put you in the best situation possible for you to be a member of a championship-winning NBA team. Mm-hmm. And we are going to do this every single year, whether we win it or not. We're going to learn. We're going to win. We're going to lose. We're going to have fun doing it together as a team, but we don't care if it's fun if we win. We just want to win.
Jimmy Butler was homeless as a teenager. I don't know how many people know that now, but I remember when he was coming up on the Chicago Bulls, that was a topic of discussion. This kid has intensity. It's the word I'm going to keep using and banging over everyone's head. That intensity comes from a willingness to survive. And Kris, you mentioned it is a dog-eat-dog world out there. The one caveat I'll add is that when you come to the Miami Heat, the culture is very much, no, you're one of us now. Like, we look out for our own. And Jimmy Butler has completely bought into that. Over this postseason, he's been nothing short of spectacular. 28.5 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, 5.7 assists per game. That type of play comes from a place of, I'm going to give you my best shot each and every night, because he probably looks around. Now, he's a Marquette guy, touted to some extent, but not like a LeBron, not like a Durant, not like a Curry or a Giannis, not respected on that level because he's not seen as that type of player. He's not a freak of nature kind of guy. A little bit more of an average build to him, but does some pretty spectacular things because of that work ethic that's built through his own personal story and what he's been able to cultivate as a member of the Heat.
Well, usually I talk numbers with you, Colin, but let's go to Miles here. Jimmy Butler in these NBA playoffs. We've got the stats. Throw him up there. 28.5 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, almost 6 assists per game. He's at 5.7. Just under 49% from the field, which is just under 50% from the field. I don't want to get too carried away with rounding a 3 up to a 6 to a 9 to 100, but 48.8%. Matt?
Yeah.
2 steals per game. That is the same way that 40% from 3 is elite. 2 steals per game. That's your benchmark. That is what with the basketball people I've spoken to. Atlantic Division scout, 2 steals per game is the number. If someone's giving you that, you're not going to ask for more from them defensively. That's what you're getting. But here's the thing, and Miles, here's why I come to you on this. We did a lot of stat analysis with the Florida women's basketball team this season, but it's different when you watch the games play out. And I feel like those 2 steals per game tell a story about Butler, his defense and the Miami defense that maybe just the raw 2.0 number doesn't tell. What do you see when you watch Jimmy Butler out there, especially on the defensive end? Do you see him as an outlier of a star because he gives his all on the defensive end in a way that other guys may not to save themselves offensively? Or do you think is that just the whole Jimmy mythology, is that he is that guy? What's your take on that, Miles?
I think it's safe to say he's an outlier, simply because there's very few superstars in the league at that Jimmy Butler level where you'd rely on them with a game on the line from a defensive perspective, right? I think with most Tier 1 NBA superstars, they're not necessarily guarding the number 1 offensive option on the other team night in and night out. But with the game on the line, you got Jimmy Butler on the court, there's absolutely no one else who's going to take that number 1 assignment, right? I think down the stretch, right, turning over to Denver now, that final stop against the Lakers, right? LeBron James drives left, right? He gets caught up. In that kind of situation, right, you need one single stop. It's absolutely Jimmy Butler on the other team's number 1 option, no question about it. And I don't know if there's really any other top 15 players in the league where you can definitively say, yes, he's going to be on their number 1 option.
I don't know if that's by design for him to be the best defender, because I don't think, even with the steals, and he's very good at creating steal opportunities, I don't think he's a gifted defender in the same way that I look at someone like a Jaren Jackson Jr. or a Marcus Smart. I just think he wants it more than the other guys sometimes, and that counts. Like, I know we talk a lot about, who do you want playing defense on that last possession, as you were saying, Miles, but I don't know if it's because he's their best defender. I just think it's because he is the team's leader. He is their best player on the court, and he wants that assignment every time.
Yeah,
exactly. Sets the tone, and tone is a huge thing in playoff basketball maybe not as important over the course of an 82-game regular season where you're going to have peaks and valleys and everyone kind of just accepts that legs get tired and you drag through a couple games here and there. Come playoff time, tone matters. Tone makes a difference. Jimmy Butler, never afraid to take the biggest assignment possible and set the tone for the team.
He is the tone setter, the setter of tones, right? And I think that when you look at Jimmy as a superstar, he's just a very known quantity. And I think that's it's a good quality. You always know what you're going to get out of Jimmy Butler, and that's what made him such a perfect fit for these Miami Heat. We're going to get to predicting how these NBA Finals play out. We're going to get to predicting our NBA Finals MVP choices, but we're going to have to break before we do so. So stay tuned, everyone. Wait on us to come right back because you are not going to want to miss the end of this show. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, I'm Kris Pursiainen.
And I'm Will Grant.
And we're two of the hosts for WFUV's very own basketball podcast, Pick and Pod.
Tune in weekly for updates on our takes of the latest around the NBA and exclusive insight from our very own Knicks and Nets beat reporters.
We'll have you covered on everything from all of the NBA's latest drama we know and love
to debating all year long which team will get to lift that golden Larry O'Brien in June.
Don't miss a beat from the hardwood on WFUV's Pick and Pod. Get us out in time, but we got to talk about these predictions. We got to talk about them. So yes, we got a little ending to the show here, a little gift wrap, little bow, little wrapping paper, and nice calm ending. Just kidding. Let's get some hot takes going. Let's get fired up because we have the NBA Finals ahead of us. This is our last chance this year to put our lives on the line, to say, here's my prediction, and I'm standing by it. Let's talk. I've got the Denver Nuggets. I predicted them to be the number 1 seed in the West before the season started. I did not predict them to make it to the NBA Finals. I had the Los Angeles Lakers going to the NBA Finals, and while that drew lots of ire from my particularly Knick-based following, they didn't like that. I got to say that Lakers team had depth and they had the stars. And that was the reason why I thought they had the formula. Initiator, scorer, depth. But they didn't have the experience, the coach that really stuck with them. Ham is new. Darvin Ham, great coach, in my opinion. I thought he was pretty good in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree.
But Mike Malone fights for these guys for a living. He doesn't strategize for them for a living. He lays himself on the line for these guys for a living. He comes out after wins and says, you're not respecting us enough, and I want to see it change before next game. And he comes out next game still the underdog, and they win again, and he says, I told you that my guys are dogs. Stop disrespecting them. And they did it again. They said the Lakers would win. He came out. I love Mike Malone. He is New York City born and raised, and he acts like it out there in those press conferences on the court. You got to love what you see. And I think that when you take a look at the Denver Nuggets head strategist in Mike Malone, their creator in Nikola Jokic, their play finisher, their scorer in Jamal Murray, a secondary creator in his own right, and the depth that they have, the diversity of the depth they have. They've got the shooter in Contavious Caldwell-Pope. They've got the shooter-scorer in Michael Porter Jr. They've got the scorer-rebounder in Aaron Gordon. They've got the rebounder-defender in Bruce Brown. They've got A, B, B, C, C, D, D. They've got it all going. This is the team. It was under my nose the whole time, and I missed it because I was too wrapped up in the Los Angeles Lakers star power. I ignored the Denver Nuggets. I was wrong, and I'm here to right that wrong. Nuggets in 6 because the Miami Heat will continue their hot shooting streak into the NBA Finals. Tyler Hero will return. He will give them the jolt needed to win a game. But that's 2 games. And I got to say, the Nuggets will win the rest. I've got the Nuggets in 6. I'm confident in their confidence in themselves. Colin, how are you feeling about this series?
I have the Nuggets in 6 as well. I think Jokic's passing ability will highlight the series. I think Miami will put up a very good fight, better than people are expecting, because when you have guys like Caleb Martin, Jimmy Butler, that's just the product you're going to get. I think ultimately, though, once Mike Malone starts realizing that certain guys are killing him on the other end of the court, he'll start trapping the likes of Butler and Martin. He'll use someone like an Aaron Gordon a Porter Jr.
Love that.
Set some double teams, and I don't think Miami has seen that type of approach. Boston tried it a few times. In the games that they won, it worked beautifully for them.
New York double-teamed only Butler the whole time, and that's why the depth killed them.
I think Malone will be smarter. I think you're going to see double teams on even Strus once they start realizing that when he gets the ball, other guys will start to flood open. I think Jokic will also win MVP for what it's worth because of that passing ability. I think that goes without saying. It's either going to be Jokic or Murray for that MVP trophy if Denver is to win this series. So Denver in 6.
I love Miami. I love Eric Spoelstra.
I can hear the but. It's
But
no.
The issue is going to be depth for me, right? What Miami's done is spectacular, but it's also, in my mind, a tad unsustainable. They've had Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin turn into completely Tier 1, top 15 in the league guard play at times superstars, right? Bench players turned real-life starters. But because of that transition, where did that leave the Miami bench? Completely empty. When you have to play all these games, right, throughout this 3-4 week stretch, it will surely catch up by the end of the finals. I do think that Miami can grab at least 2 games. My official prediction, I'm going to go Denver in 7. I think Miami wins 3 games. But do they win this series? I don't think they can, because Denver's the type of team where their starting 5, really, like you said, Chris, everybody's got such a solid role. Everybody does what they do well. And then you turn to their bench, also very few flaws. If Miami was full strength and their bench players could be bench players, maybe they'd have a chance. I love Jimmy Butler. I love Eric Spoelstra. It's so hard for me to say I don't think they're going to win the finals. That being said, Denver in 7, what they have is just too special.
I love the pick of 7 games. Not just because Colin and I both had 6 and you gave us something different, but I do think that when there's complete unanimity in both winner and in games, that all of those people are going to be wrong. So now there is a chance for someone to be right here. Thank you guys for those takes. I will say, I know it's chalk. I got to go Jokic as finals MVP. This is, even if Murray deserves it, they're going to go Jokic because they didn't give him MVP. It's that simple. It's the politics. It's the part that we all don't like about
100%.
this. Like I said earlier, I thought Embiid deserved the MVP last year. He didn't get it. Jokic deserved it this year. Embiid didn't get it last year. So who won? All right. So it's like, you got to play the game. You take one, you give one. It's nasty. You should just give the award to who deserves it. You should just give the Eastern Conference Finals MVP to Caleb Martin instead of making it a popularity contest and giving it to Jimmy Butler. Because in that case, what'd you make the award for? Just let the guy go win Finals MVP if you were going to hand it to him. But his teammate earned it, right? They weren't afraid to give Andre Iguodala the Finals MVP. That's an award. Why we got to go chalk with the Conference Finals MVP? I mean, let that mean something. I think we're in an age where these Finals MVPs, even if it's Murray, even if Aaron Gordon is the guy who deserves it, that it will be Nikola Jokic. So if the Denver Nuggets win,
no doubt,
it's going to be Nikola Jokic. Lock that in, and I am going to say that they win in 6. My final final question for you guys, because we previewed this matchup earlier. We talked about each team's road to the finals. Who is your X factor in this series? I know maybe someone like Caleb Martin, an easy pick. For me, I'm going to go with the player that Miles highlighted earlier as the most heat player on the Nuggets. I'm going to go with Bruce Brown. Colin, who you got?
I'm going to go with Aaron Gordon because I
Love
think
it.
Miami's
That
going to have to
physicality
play.
you were talking about.
And Miami's going to have to play quick to win this series because you want to keep Jokic's wheels going. That can also hurt them on the other end, though, because Aaron Gordon is a killer in transition. If Miami wants to play quick and Denver decides, okay, we'll play ball, Aaron Gordon's going to be a big part of their offensive attack in transition on the other end.
Colin, thank you. I agree, especially with your reasoning earlier. I love it. Miles?
Two quick ones. The obvious one in Caleb Martin, right? I think if he's not that top-level superstar in the finals, the Heat do not stand a chance. And number two, also sticking with the Heat, Tyler Hero. That transition is going to be everything. Like you said, we don't know if we're going to get him back game 3. We're supposed to get him back game 3, probably off the bench. I'd like to see him off the bench, but if he is an impact player early on, 20 points out the gate with consistency starting at game 3, the Heat are a different ball club.
Absolutely, guys. I got to say, this was really fun. I had an absolute blast previewing these NBA finals, especially with you two. Makes it all the more special. Miles Grossman, thank you for joining us today, for giving us your takes. Colin Loughran, thank you for joining us today. Our viewers and listeners, thank you guys for calling in, giving your takes, asking your questions, for commenting on the YouTube. Leave a thumbs up. Make sure to support the WFUV Sports social channels, especially across Twitter, Instagram, and our new TikTok, as we do our best to keep you in the loop and covered on all things NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB. And I gotta say, none of this is possible without our masterminds behind the scenes. We got Julia Moss, video producing, and we got Chaz McAdams, radio producing, behind the boards. Can't come up with a word that starts with a B, so I'm just going to leave it there. Wanted to say, the brain behind the boards. There it is. Jazzy, my guy. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Follow Colin Loughran, Miles Grossman, and myself, Kris Pursiainen, over on Twitter for all the latest updates regarding the NBA Finals, the WNBA, the NBA, you name it. It's basketball. We got it. Thanks for tuning in. This show is a production of WFUV Sports. Sports director of WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. Have a great summer if you don't hear from me again.